and we appreciate you here with us. So again, let's go over our recap for review for last part 3, what we did last week. So we'll go back to it and I'll run through these slides really quickly so we can jump into our focus today, which is Zoom bombing and also webinars. So let's see. Okay, so part 3, we talked about account settings and setting up meetings. So when it comes to scheduling a meeting, we talked about, do you want to require registration or do you want to send as a calendar request when it comes to scheduling a meeting? We talked about some meeting options, which are enable join before host, enable waiting room where you can have participants wait in a waiting room until you're ready to start your meeting. You can also record the meeting automatically, also in your settings options. And then also something to consider when you're scheduling a meeting is, will you have an alternative host, someone that will help you, say for example, if you needed to start if they needed to start the meeting without you ahead of time, or also take care of other tasks throughout the meeting as well. We also talked about reoccurring meetings, how to schedule reoccurring meetings, and how reoccurring meetings are good for if you have say a classroom that is scheduled for a set date and time throughout the week, same time. This will be good for it. So you can schedule a reoccurring meeting on three different places. So those three different places that we talked about was the Zoom app on desktop, Zoom website, and then the Zoom mobile. As I mentioned last week, the Zoom mobile is the most difficult because they don't give you a lot of different options when it comes to customizing your meeting. So the best fit is Zoom website, the Zoom website, as we talked about. Because you'll have more options when it comes to scheduling your reoccurring meeting, and the options are very clear to understand. So also we talked about how even if you do set these reoccurring meetings, you do have the option to edit these meetings and also delete them. So this is what it looks like if you're going to schedule it on the app. And then also this is what it looks like if you're going to schedule it in the Zoom app as well. So we talked about placing your topic, generating an automatic meeting ID, which we'll talk about, which is important when it comes to Zoom bombing. We talked about having the video on or off for the host and the participants, and also some of the audio and the calendar invites as well. And then we also talked about some of the advanced options when it comes to muting your participants upon entry to eliminate some of that outside noise when they're joining the meeting. So say, for example, someone joined the meeting and you can hear their dog barking or their baby crying or something like that. So they'll automatically be muted when they enter the meeting. So that's a great option. Also, the settings, we talked about meeting settings, how security is important, how you can enable it and customize a waiting room, how people with Zoom accounts, authenticated users, they must have a Zoom account. We also talked about with the scheduling meeting, how you can mute the participants again upon entry, the host of participants video functionality, and how to the join before host, some of those options when it comes to your meeting settings. And then also, we also talked about in the meeting basics, so the chat saving, file transfer, co-host, polling, the options of screen sharing, annotation, and whiteboards, which is good if you're trying to get that engagement going on with your participants in your meeting. The nonverbal feedback and reaction emojis, and then also remote slide control, giving someone else in the meeting permission to share the slides or control the slides, navigate the slides, and then also renaming yourself in a meeting. So say, for example, if I join this meeting under our BHS Zoom account, it will come up, my name would say South Bay Prevention instead of saying Erica Winston. So having that option of being able to change your name. And then also in meeting advance, we talked about breakout rooms, closed captioning, virtual backgrounds, adding a video filter, and then also focus mode, which show only host and co-host video when it comes to your viewing, and then also live streaming options, settings and recordings, what was the purpose of your recording. So to go back and if you want to share this recording to people to watch later, maybe they weren't able to join the meeting, this is a great tool that they can, you can share the video with them and they're able to watch the recording to it and whatnot. And then we moved into live streaming your meeting. So you can live stream on Facebook, the workplace, YouTube, or Twitch account. So some of the ones that we use is Facebook. We live stream to them often, as we're doing right now. And then with the more function, you'll also have the option to link these accounts to your Zoom meeting to where it's easier for you if you choose to record at any time. It's just a click of button, going to your settings and doing that. And also as a reminder, you must be an administrator on the account that you are trying to stream to. So whether it's live on Facebook, live on the workplace by Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or a custom live streaming services. And then live streaming on Facebook, we went over some of those basics. Where do you want to share your live video? Where you can share it on your timeline. You can share it to a group, or you can share it to a page you manage, and you must be an administrator of that page, as I mentioned. And this is what the live stream Zoom meeting to Facebook Live would look like if you're setting that up. So as you see, it's the meeting title that you want it to be displayed on Facebook. Also a brief description of this Zoom meeting that they'll be viewing. And then also you would click an option out of the drop down menu where it says choose where to post your Zoom meeting, and you'll have that option to choose where you want to share your video to. So as I mentioned, whether it's your page or individual group. And then you would simply click go live, and then from there you'll be setting up your meeting for live on Facebook, and you'll be going live. So live on Facebook, as you heard today, when we started the live, going live on Facebook, you got that notification on your screen where it says this meeting is being live streamed. So it gives you the option of got it, like you're okay with this meeting being live streamed on Facebook, or you have the option of simply leaving the meeting if you don't feel comfortable with being on a live stream on Facebook. So more of the live stream and to the custom services. So with the custom services, it allows live streaming of the meeting. So you will simply enable it by clicking the button. So as you see, it's blue. So it will allow live streaming on the meeting in the Facebook app, workplace, by Facebook, YouTube, and custom streaming. And you would simply provide a specific instruction that will enable the meeting host in your account to configure the live streaming. So as you see, those options, those handles were added. So that's where basically it will be live streamed to. And then off to the right, as you see the screenshot, it says the live stream the Zoom webinar to a custom service. So you have the option of doing that as well. And it gives you the instructions for the live streaming. So you would simply follow those instructions and then go live. And then also we talked about customizing the waiting room. So you have the option to customize the waiting room. If you all recall, last week, some of you all were able to view a video while you're waiting in the waiting room for us to start the meeting. So that's an option that you can do. So you will simply enable the waiting room to have everyone go into the waiting room. So as you see, the blue button is the button is blue. So it's enabled. And then you also have the option of doing customizing the waiting room options, which is where you will add that video that I talked about. So this is the screen that I'm currently talking about, the customizing the waiting room. So you could add a title to it. So the host will let you in soon. We might have a message. Hey everyone, we're going to start shortly. In the meantime, enjoy this video or whatnot. Or you could simply have your logo and description displayed if that's what you choose to do. So everyone in the waiting room will be able to see your custom waiting room option that you created. So let's jump into our part 4, which, as I mentioned, we'll go over our webinar features. Well, we'll go over Zoom bombing first and our webinar features today. So let's jump right into our Zoom bombing. So, and we want to talk about how to avoid Zoom bombing. So how I got Zoom bombed, and we have a video for you all to watch right now. Just basically, Melissa's talking about her experiences with Zoom bombing, and let's watch it.
Hi, everyone. It's Melissa from MAD, and I'm here to talk to you about Zoom bombing. Yes, even those of us who navigate Zoom like a boss can get Zoom bombed. So here's what happened. We were hosting a collegiate committee meeting, obviously open to the public, want to connect with as many college campuses as possible. So we set up the meeting, didn't use registration, and posted it online. So right there, those were a few mistakes. One, I did let someone else set up the Zoom, so I'm not sure what their settings look like. Two, if you don't set up registration and then you post online, that really leaves you susceptible to Zoom bombing. Now, I've said Zoom bombing several times. If you haven't heard what it is, it's exactly what it sounds like. People, often multiple people, come into your room and bomb, so to speak. So that's often inappropriate images, inappropriate sounds. They will, use their profile picture to display inappropriate images. Although I did not experience it, I'm sure if your file sharing is on as well, they could also share some inappropriate things in the chat. So again, to review, setting up registration is always key. And if you're going to post online, you want to make sure, again, you have that registration because, yes, we want our events to be open to the public, but at the same time, we don't want those nefarious folks to interrupt what we've got going on. So we're in the meeting, right? Everything's peaceful. Things are happening. We're about halfway through an hour meeting and we have a waiting room set, which is good. So people start to join the waiting room and we're like, oh my gosh, look at all these people who are late. So we admit them into the room. And, me being the host that I am, hostess with the mostest, greeting people. Thank you for coming. And the tone of their voice acted like they knew me. Oh, hey, Melissa. Slightly creepy, obviously foreboding of what was to happen. So then we start to hear sounds, moaning. Then videos start to change and show inappropriate messages. And I am not the host of the meeting, so I'm asking the host to make me a co-host. She's not aware of how to do that, unfortunately. We've since reviewed that. So that's another thing you want to check. Make sure you have co-hosting turned on in your settings. That way, once the meeting starts, you can assign co-hosts and whoever's leading the meeting doesn't have to worry about some of this nitty-gritty background stuff and the co-host can handle it. So had I been a co-host, I could have possibly helped her remove people, put them back in the waiting room or report them all together. But unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. So this is where I highly recommend that you go to your toolbar, hit security, and suspend all participant activities. That is your only option at that point if you don't have a host or you don't have a co-host, excuse me, and you don't have any of those other security settings in place. So that is my lesson learned on Zoom bombing. So to review, if you let someone else set up the meeting, make sure you review the settings. I know it can be micromanaging or, but there's a way to present that in a way that's a learning experience for everyone. Registration, if you are going to make your event open to the public, set it up for registration, especially if you're posting it on social media. And lastly, make sure you have your co-hosting. This is something you have to set in your settings, and then you can assign as many co-hosts as you possibly need when you're in your meeting. So there you have it, folks. Sorry I couldn't join you today, but I'll go back to Erica and Jen.
All right, thank you, Melissa, for that wonderful video. So now we're gonna move into our next slides and we're gonna review what Melissa talked about. So we talked about these Zoom bombers. I also like to call them also known as internet trolls. I don't know how many of you all have been in meetings and have experienced this, witnessed this yourself, but it can be very distracting and disruptive to the meeting that you're having if you don't have those settings enabled prior to the meeting. So
Hi, everyone.
so let me navigate to the next slide. So Zoom has built-in tools that can prevent Zoom bombing, as Melissa mentioned. So to the left, this is a screenshot of what it will actually look like when you go into the settings to make the changes that you need to when it comes to setting up your meeting. So the Zoom meeting setup screen with all of the appropriate options toggled on. The first one, it says you should never use your personal meeting ID. Using your personal meeting ID, as you recall last week, is good for when you have, like, say, the classroom and you have these classrooms that are scheduled on a certain date and certain time for a number amount of weeks. So that's a good use of using your personal meeting ID. But it's also good to have one already generated. That way only the people that has that password are able to get in that meeting. So the goal of these Zoom bombers, as I mentioned, is to wreak havoc, to cause any problems to your meeting, disruptions that they want to do. So as we said, we always want to make sure that we use a meeting password and also use the Zoom's waiting room feature as an option as well. And then also you want to make sure that you mute the audio and disable video for meeting attendees, so that way they can just bust through and start sharing their screen in the middle of your presentation or in the middle of your meeting, or verbally start. In my experience, I've had youth get on, they start moaning, they start sharing pornographic images and whatnot. So you always want to make sure that you mute your audio and disable the video for meeting attendees. And then also, as I said, with the screen sharing, you also want to make sure that you turn off the screen sharing option for everyone but the meeting host, and then also whoever you appoint as a co-host. And that was the person that Melissa said was really important to appoint. Identify that person. That way, should you do get the meeting information get leaked in, we do get a Zoom bomber, the co-host can step in right away and put this person in a waiting room, and that way we can regain control of the meeting and or the class or whatever it is, and move forward with what we're doing without the interruptions. So more into the, really quick, let me just move my toolbar down. In the mute audio and disable video for meeting attendees. So disabling video for everyone but the host will prevent any unwanted content from being displayed on camera by the attendees. So as I mentioned, like the pornographic images, this can be turned off during the meeting setup. So as Melissa mentioned, you also, when the meeting is set up, just for security purpose, I would just suggest that you go back and make sure that all your settings is set up correctly how you want it. And then also with the muting audio, as you see to the left, it gives you the different options. So it says mute participants on entry, allow participants to mute themselves. You can allow them to mute themselves. Play, enter, exit chime. So it'll be a sound when they leave or come in. Allow participants to rename themselves. We've had people, I've seen people have inappropriate names as their name. So you can secure that option. You can lock the meeting, which is highly suggested. Once you have all your participants, say if you're a teacher and you have all your students in that class for that day, I suggest that you lock the meeting that way. So it's an extra layer of protection, so that way you don't have any Zoom bombers entering your classroom. So after it starts, the meeting's locked, the classroom's locked. And then also the lower hands option, and then also put participants in a waiting room on entry, as everyone was in a waiting room once they entered today as well.
Erica, you may have to get rid of your toolbar because it's showing the
okay
box.
Can you remind me how to do that again, Jen?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Go to the more section
Okay,
and
I'm,
then you said what?
I'm on more.
And then it should say something about your
Hide,
toolbar.
hide floating meeting controls.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so as you see, I'm still trying to navigate Zoom like a boss. So there you have it. Thank you, Jim, for that, pointing that out. So moving forward, so also with the turn off sharing screen option, as I mentioned, to avoid Zoom bombers from visually taking over your meeting or your classroom, you can only have the option set to where only the host can share or the co-host can share. The host can choose to toggle this feature while the meeting is in progress. The host will use the green share button at the bottom of the toolbar on the menu, and they would simply just click the arrow next to the open the video option and click advanced sharing option. And from that window, they have that option to make sure that they can set up who can share and make sure that it's set up to only the host can share or also that the co-host could share. So as you see on the toolbar, when you click next to the share screen option, the arrow that I mentioned, it has one participant can share at a time. So say, for example, if Jen and I are both, she's the host and I'm the co-host, and if she's sharing her sound, like the music playing in the beginning, I can't share my screen because it'll stop her sharing. So that's how that'll work. So one person can share at a time, and then also multiple participants could share simultaneously at a time. And then you also have the advanced sharing option as well. So I did talk about locking your meeting, that way you don't have any outsiders in. So once the meeting begins or your classroom begins and everyone's in that's supposed to be in, you can simply lock the meeting to outsiders and assign at least 2 meeting co-hosts, which going back to Melissa, she said it's important. She shared that it's important because, as I mentioned also, that those co-hosts can help you navigate some of the meeting, the controls, and getting control over the meeting if somebody bypasses their efforts to get into the meeting. Your co-host can go into the same meeting icon, setting icons, and then to the meetings tab, they can scroll down to the co-host and make sure, the host can scroll down to the co-host and make sure that that option is enabled, and also the co-host as well. And if Zoom asks you for verification, you will simply just click to turn on. So you will go to manage your participants in the screen, then you will click the more option, and then you have these different options, as I mentioned, but our focus here is to lock the meeting. So in that more option, you'll have the option of clicking locking the meeting once everyone is in the meeting or in the classroom that's supposed to be there. So then with Zoom bombers, when Zoom bombers attack the video chat, so what you would do with this, the host or one of the co-hosts that are assigned during that meeting, they can simply click the security button at the bottom of the toolbar, and then they could click on to remove that participant. And when they click to remove that participant, they will click on the participant name, and then they will simply remove them from the meeting. So as you see in the screenshot above that, you will click security where the red arrow is pointed, and then you will simply click remove participant. So when you click to remove the participant, they will be put in the waiting room, or they will be removed from the meeting. So to the next screenshot, we have the click mute all. So you have the option to mute participants upon their entry that we talked about, which is a good option to have enabled when the meeting starts. You also have the option to allow participants to mute themselves, and then also enable the waiting room. So with the click mute all, this makes it so that unwelcome participants can't use your microphone to disrupt your audio, so they can't take over the audio and start playing inappropriate music or making sexual comments and whatnot. So that was it for Zoom bombers and are also known as our internet trolls. So I will hand it over to Jen to walk us through webinars.
Thank you, Erica. I'm gonna ask that you just leave your slides up since we only have a couple, and then we can switch screens. So again, thank you all for coming. Super excited that we get to wrap up navigating Zoom like a big boss. I think this has been a great series. Folks have been sharing with us that they've been learning a lot. You all know we're in webinar mode right now. However, we are gonna have an opportunity for you to come up so you can see what that would look like. If you've never experienced a webinar on this side of the screen or this side of your virtual space. And so webinars can definitely be a great tool to use, you know, to create a different feel for the work that you're doing. The one thing I will say about webinars that I really like as it relates to me participating in other people's webinars is that I don't have to put my full face on. Granted, I don't wear makeup and do all of that stuff. But the point is, like, you know, maybe you have an early morning webinar and you just haven't gotten dressed yet. You just haven't had time. You could participate in the webinar without having to show your face. Even if you were to be allowed to speak, you could speak and you wouldn't have to, you know, get dressed up and do all that. And then, you know, you finish the webinar and then you go get dressed and do what you need to do, right? So it definitely provides an opportunity for your participants to be more relaxed. They can still engage and listen and everything because you can still do polls and so forth. But it's just, you know, it just provides a more relaxed vibe for the participant, in my opinion. And then it also provides an opportunity for you to have like a really nice feel to your webinar or your meeting. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about some of the pricing for it. So I think I might have mentioned previously, or maybe that was an internal conversation we had, but how Zoom previously did it with webinar was that you could purchase or add webinar for 100 people, and then it moved to 500 people. And so for 100 people, man, I can't remember what it was, like $40, maybe $50 for you to be able to have it. And it was on a monthly basis. You also have the opportunity to purchase, like maybe you only need it for 1 month, you can purchase for that month. Previously, how they had it set up, you have the ability to, and I'm not saying do it, but it's happened to us where we purchase webinar and then we're like, we didn't even use it, like we didn't need it. And so next day we like canceled it. And then Zoom prorated, they prorated for the days that we didn't use within the rest of the month. So that was cool because then we didn't have to pay like the full amount. However, Zoom is like, you purchase webinar now, then even if you cancel it next day, same day, whatever, you're going to have it until the end of the month. We aren't reimbursing you any money. And that's just kind of what it is. So be mindful of that, depending on what you want to use a webinar for if you're planning to use it. Now they have it up to 500 attendees. So that's the minimum one that you can purchase. They also have what's called Zoom events. And so Zoom events is a different type of platform. Maybe you've participated in something on like Hopin or whatever. And so Zoom events, the event platform aspect, just creates a different vibe for you. They like to have like a stage area, opportunities for you to be able to have different meeting rooms. And so if you were to do like a conference or something, then the space in the event would look very different. With webinar version, you could still do like a conference or something, but just know that folks won't be able to go into different rooms. So they don't have like breakout rooms for webinar. You can also still do a conference and use meeting version, which is something that we've done before, where folks are able to come we have it through Zoom meeting, and then we have breakout rooms where we have presenters in those breakout rooms, and they get to share, and the students or the adults get to do presentations and that kind of stuff. So just be mindful of that. You can take a look on your own to look at what the different functions are and so forth, because the same types of stuff that you have with meetings as far as the recordings and so forth, having registration lists and the attendee list and stuff like that, you can still get from Zoom webinar. And then our next slide. So we're going to focus on how to schedule a webinar. So we talked about the pricing. So let's say you already have the webinar version, then you're going to now move into scheduling a webinar. So as you all can see, you all received a link or an email that had that information, right? For you to be able to come onto the webinar. Now, as it relates to the webinar version itself, you as a speaker, it's gonna look, or you as the host of the account, it's gonna look very different for you. So it doesn't look the same as when you would schedule a regular meeting. Well, it has some similarities, but not specifically. So for instance, navigating Zoom like a boss, this top part right here looks similar to, like, you can schedule occurrences, you can have a topic and so forth. But as you start to move down, then you start to notice other types of things. So now participants, you have the host, you have panelists, and then you have participants. So since I'm the main person on this account, I'm the host, and then Erica is a panelist. So any panelists that you have, you would be able to add their email. They would get a unique link to where they can come into, they'll come up to the stage essentially. So like Erica's able to be up here with me, and then you all can see us, but as panelists, we cannot see you. And then as you look at the webinar options, you have an opportunity to do Q&A, which is not the same as it relates to meetings. So meetings only has chat. But in Q&A, with webinar, you can have a Q&A section where people can ask questions and get answers. You can also have a chat section where folks can still chat and so forth. And then there are different settings with that too. Now, this next one, which says enable practice session, this is something you want to make sure you click. The reason why is, when you have Zoom meetings, for Zoom meetings, you have a, what do you call it? The room people go into, waiting room. You have a waiting room, right? And with the waiting room, you folks are able to stay in the waiting room until you let them in and so forth. For webinar, if enable practice session is not clicked, that means that once you start the webinar, everybody will be able to just be there, hear your conversations and everything as you're prepping or whatever it is. And so the first webinar we ever did, that happened. We had people typing in the chat like we can hear what you're saying, or oh wow, that's cool, or whatever. And then we're like, what? Like, how are they able to hear this? Not realizing that there were no waiting rooms for a webinar. So when you enable practice session, then the webinar will not begin, meaning people who are there waiting, they won't be able to come into the main space until you click to start the webinar. Okay. So they also have enable host control of panelist appearance. I'm not going to get into those details because that's more personal and really about if you want your panelist appearance to be a certain way. There are ways to do, like, have certain backgrounds or things like that for symmetry purposes, whatever. You can also record the webinar automatically, just like in meeting. So if you click that, that means once you start the webinar, so you have enabled practice session, but once you start the webinar, it's going to automatically start recording. And then we don't need to go over the specific reasons and enable language interpretation. If you are planning to use an interpreter for a different language, then you do want to make sure you enable language interpretation. All right, and then you see right here, it says start practice session because we've already created this and we enabled the practice session, right? So you're gonna click start practice session, then it's gonna take you into the space, your webinar space. Then when you're ready to start, you click start webinar, and then it'll double check with you by doing a little pop-up screen to make sure you're sure. And then you say yes, and then you'll be good to go and you can see the folks who are in your space. Now, you see I added Erica as a panelist under invitations. So you see they have different sections here. And so we'll go through the different sections. So I have Erica listed here as a panelist. You can always continue to add more panelists. So you'll click edit, and then you can put people's names and emails, and you can either continue to add people, or if you're like, I don't want this person anymore as a panelist, you can delete. If a panelist says, hey, I never received a link, you can also click resend, and it will send a confirmation email to them. So then that way they have that and be able to have the link. You always want to make sure you click save. And then I always leave this checked because it says basically if you add a new panelist, for them to receive the invitation immediately. So then that way you don't have to worry about waiting or anything like that. Now, it talks about invite attendees right here. So it shows you how many attendees you can invite. It also has the registration link. So if you were to click these two squares right here, you could copy the link and then you could email the link to anyone. So like I'm able to take this link, I could drop it into the chat. Oops, let's go to everyone. I could drop it into the chat, and then all of you would be able to see the link, or I could email it or whatever. The other thing too, as it relates to this section that we wanted to make sure we covered is that you can also go in and make edits to the registration as well. So some of the same things that we talked about as it related to the meetings, we won't worry about tracking the pixels because that's like another time. And then your registrations, you can click edit, and then you can manage your registration, your registrants. So whomever registered, if you want to delete someone, whatever the case may be. Now, this next piece focuses on email settings. This is also different than what's in the meeting version. So if you look at this, you can select your email language. So all of the participants will receive in English, but one of the things I would say do is select same as recipient's default language. And the reason why is because someone who joins your webinar, they may speak a different language or need the information in a different language. You don't have to worry about translating or figuring it out. It'll be able to just send that email to them in that language. The other thing too is if you want to say you're using someone else's email address or as the contact email, click edit, you can edit that. And then there's also invitation email to panelists. So if you wanted to, you can either say send an invitation to email panelists or not send an invitation. You have that ability to make these kind of changes in here. The other thing too is as it relates to your confirmation email that you send to registrants, you can make edits to that. So maybe changing the title, you can add some info into this body section of the email. And so if you wanted to change that for the confirmation email, you can. And then something really cool about webinar version is that you have the ability to send reminders. You can do a week before, 1 day before, 1 hour before, and whatever you click Zoom and you save it, Zoom will send that email out. So like the email that went out today, it went out 1 hour before, it had the meeting topic, and then it says starts in 1 hour. And so you could essentially click whatever ones you want. If your event is far enough out, I would say click all 3. I did have someone say when we did a webinar in 2020, I think, had someone say, I'm receiving, no, they talked to another partner of ours and said they were receiving too many emails, and if we could not send as many emails. And then I said, well, how many emails are they getting? Like, what emails? And it was, they received an email 1 week before, 1 day before, and 1 hour before. And I'm like, okay, so I hear that. But on the flip side, how many times have you signed up for something and didn't put it in your calendar and forgot? Or how many times did you sign up for something, you put it in your calendar and you still forgot? And so I really like this. Yeah, Edwina, definitely love it. I really like that because you don't have to go back and worry about the reminders. Now, for those of you who've been attending our Spring Institutes, who've gotten the emails at like 9 a.m. and it said like begins at 9:30 or whatever, we're sending those emails through meeting, right? Zoom meeting. And so not that it takes like a ton of time, but we still have to go back in and remind, we have to remember to send it out. So please be mindful of that. Something else that's super cool for webinar is that you can also do a follow-up email. So in your follow-up email, you can customize this to be, to say whatever it is that you want to say as a follow-up to them. So, you know, sometimes we're having different events or we're having whatever virtually, and we may send a follow-up email and create the language and stuff and then have to remember to do it. You can actually schedule this to where it happens at a certain time. So Zoom will automatically send it for you. So like here, you can send it anywhere between 1 to 7 days after the event. So let me give you an example. Say you are like, we have this evaluation and we need people to send it, people to complete it, or we have something that we need people to sign up for after they've attended the event. You know how it is. Sometimes people jump off and they're on to the next thing, or they forget, or whatever. You could actually customize this so then that way you can put whatever that link is or whatever that information, and you don't have to worry about coming back 2 days later, 5 days later to send that info out. Zoom will send it for you. And then additionally, we know there are people who sign up for our stuff and they do not show up. So Zoom also has the ability to, you have the ability through Zoom to send an email to folks who don't show up. And the email could say, hey, we missed you today, but here's access to the recording. Or if you'd like to join us again, or if you'd like to join us and a better time works for you, we're doing this workshop again on Monday at 2 p.m., whatever the case may be. The point is you have the ability for Zoom to do that for you so you don't have to worry about it. And then right here under the branding section, this is where you'll get into some of the branding for your registration and things like that. So the title right now is webinar registration. However, we could change this to say navigating Zoom like a big boss webinar. All right, and then I'm gonna save that. And then I'm actually gonna copy the registration link. And now it says navigating Zoom like a boss webinar, right? So you could go in and change the title of what your webinar says under branding. You can also upload a banner. So if you remember For the meeting version, we had the banner. We talked about how you can upload a banner. So that's possible. You can also upload your logo. You can even add information about your speakers. So I've seen some other organizations do this where they put brief bios and a photo of the different speakers onto the page where folks are registering. So that's also something you can do. The any buttons and things that are on Zoom, you could even go in and change the colors of those. So you can go to an existing theme that they have, or you can change it to something else. So I'm going to save this green color. I'm going to refresh our registration, and now you see it's green. And then it also has a green button. So you have the ability to make those kind of customizations as well. And then something really cool, you can do a post attendee URL. So essentially what this would be is once folks jump off of, once they exit out of your webinar, or when you close your webinar because they're so amazing and they stayed on until the end, then a screen will pop up for them, whatever you put. So whatever link you were to put here, that screen would pop up. So say you wanted to do an evaluation at the end, instead of putting the link in the chat for people to go to another something, when they exit out of the webinar, it'll automatically go to that page. The other thing too is sometimes we have people who leave early. If you already have the link and everything on here, then when someone leaves, even if they only stay for 5 minutes, that page is still going to pop up because they were in your webinar. Okay, so, and I don't even know why Zoom still has this here, because I feel like the survey part has been done. I mean, moved already to the other tab. So anyway, so the social media share description, you have the ability to add a description for folks in regards to like sharing on social media and that kind of stuff. The cool thing is if you reach capacity, you can, and you are live streaming, you can set it up where Zoom directs them to your live stream. So that can be something really cool in case you reach capacity. This is our poll from the Donald Duck one we created, but you have the ability to still do polls in webinar. Interestingly enough, when we were using webinar in 2020, polls weren't on here for you to be able to use. And quizzes were definitely not something heard of because we didn't have those in a Zoom meeting or anything. But you also have the ability to create a quiz or something like that if you wanted to. And then as you can see, you can do advanced polling if you'd like. And then we already talked about the library and how you can add stuff to that. If you wanted to create a survey or use a third-party survey, so a third-party survey could be like SurveyMonkey or something like that, then you have the ability to create that there. For Q&A, this is where you want to edit to figure out what kind of settings you would like to have. So if we're allowing Q&A, you have the ability to make edits on this. So right now, we have it set up where people, if they wanted to, they could ask an anonymous question. So what we want you all to do is on your toolbar, you should see Q&A. I want you to click Q&A and I want you to ask a question. So it doesn't have to be related to Zoom. It could be, is the sky falling? It could be, are tomatoes really red? Whatever it is. What's your favorite brand of water? I don't care. But do it in the Q&A section, not the chat section. So we want you to make sure you know where the Q&A section is. Additionally, you can also ask it anonymous because we have it checked out. So you can ask a question using the Q&A section. Additionally, you can have it where your attendees are able to view the questions and things that folks have put. You can also have it where only answered questions will be displayed. So if you have it where only answered questions will be displayed, this can be another, well, that it has to be a Zoom bombing situation, like a security measure, but it can definitely be an opportunity for, let me give an example. So say whatever it is you're doing, maybe it can be like a supercharged issue or something like that. And you know that all it takes is one question or one comment in the Q&A section that's gonna like spark a fire, create a flame, and then it's gonna get out of control. What you can do is have it where they will only see the questions that your participants will only see the questions that have been answered. You can also have it to where they can see any questions that are asked. And one of the reasons why that's cool is because sometimes you get people who they're thinking the same thing, but they may not want to ask, or maybe they're thinking the same thing, but they see that someone else has asked it. So then they're like, you know what, I'm not going to ask that because it's already listed here. So that can be a benefit there. And then as it relates to your questions, you can have it where it can be upvoted. So meaning your participants will be able to see the questions and then they can like thumbs up it, upvote it, like, hey, I have that question too, or yes, please answer this or whatever. And then also you can open it where attendees can comment. So if someone asks a question, then your attendees will be able to make a comment on it or whatever. I could see that as being great if you feel like the participants that you have will be able to add value to the webinar, to the information that's being asked and shared. So I see we have Sinclair's question. Can I have a cup of coffee? Absolutely not, Sinclair. It's too late in the day. No. And then Michelle says, will there be future Zoom and Zoom webinar classes in the future as more activities are made available? So the short answer is, I don't know. The more in-depth answer is we have not talked about doing future navigating Zoom like a boss. I think this is like the fourth one we've done. And so since it's the fourth one we've done, then you know, this, I don't know. I guess it depends on where we are, how things are moving, all that stuff. But good question, Michelle. And then I see that Selena did say, how's the weather? Very sunny right now. And I see Erica said, nice and warm. So, so that's something that's really cool, right? You have the ability to change it where your participants can see the questions, they cannot see the questions, they can answer anonymously, and so forth. So you figure out which settings will work best for you as it relates to Q&A. And then for live streaming, it tells you what to do. And then, as I mentioned, you can, if you reach capacity, you can have this set up to where Zoom will tell people who can't get on, like, hey, sorry, you were too late. Well, they won't say that, but they will let them know that they can watch the live stream. So definitely be mindful of that. Yes, Sinclair. So we can see the participants, and we're actually going to bring you all up so that you can see what we're able to see as it relates to the webinar version. And so, so anyways, so these are the different setting areas that you're able to customize with webinar. It can definitely be a great tool and something that can be good to use for a nice cleaner look, an opportunity for your participants to be a little more relaxed. And then again, it does cost money. And so one of the things I would say too, if you're interested in doing a webinar, maybe talk to someone who has a webinar version, and maybe they'll let you set it up on there. Jancy says, yes, I would like to have more training on Zoom, like a big boss, again, from you all. I appreciate that. Thank you all for the love. I think that's really awesome. Okay. So one other thing that I want to mention is that you still have the ability to do live transcription if you wanted to. And so if you wanted to turn that on to allow participants to be able to use it, you can do that via webinar. As we mentioned, you can also do polls. So that provides an opportunity for you to do that. If you wanted to collect information from folks or do something fun, or anything like that, we have the ability to do, if you're a panelist or something, to be able to do like different reactions as well. And so you have the ability on here with, as it relates to seeing participants, you can see them, and then you have the ability to call people up as well. So for webinar version, you all can see us, but we cannot see you. Now, you can allow a participant to talk, and when you allow them to talk, all they're doing is talking. Their face will not be shown. They will only be allowed to talk. So be mindful of that as you click through and you allow people to do different things. So what we're going to do first, we're going to do allow to talk. And so Sinclair, I'm going to click allow to talk for you. You're going to have to unmute, and then you can talk to the group.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Okay.
Everything's going.
Everything's going well.
Enjoy your training.
Thank you. That's awesome. I love hearing that. So this is just a brief demonstration, right? Sinclair has the ability to unmute and talk, and all he has the ability to do is talk. So he has not been moved up as a panelist or anything like that. Now, what we're able to do is remove his permission to talk. We can also remove him from the room. So say you might have someone and they're getting out of control, you can also still remove them. We can rename them. We can promote them to a panelist if we want, and then we can also send them a direct chat. Now, I'm going to remove Sinclair's permission to talk. And so now Sinclair has gone back down with the, well, not down, but back into the other side of the space in the audience seats, right? Sinclair is back in the audience seats. And so he does not have the ability to talk. The one other thing I'm going to say before we move you all up to be panelists is that when you all are doing webinars, something really cool is that you have the ability, if any panelists have their camera off, you will not see them. So they're still in the room. Like I have my camera off. You all saw Erica, you won't see them. So Erica has turned off her camera. And so now you should only see me. So when we're doing panels or things like that, we'll have all the panelists have their camera on, and when their panel is done and we're continuing with the program, we tell them, turn off your camera. So then that way, they won't see anybody on the panelists or people who aren't speaking during that time, and it provides a different feel. So with webinar, you have the ability to do that. Additionally, on you all side, you can raise your virtual hand. When you raise your virtual hand as a presenter, you can see who has their virtual hand raised, and then you can allow them to speak, call them up as a panelist, and so forth. So we're going to move you all up to be panelists. If you are camera ready, turn on your camera. If you aren't, that's also fine too, not a problem. You can also accept it or not accept it. It's up to you. But we're going to allow you to come up and be panelists if you'd like to. So we've sent out, or not sent out, but we switched over to allow you to be panelists. And so one of the things that I want you all to do who are up here with us on stage is to click the participants list. Now, when you click the participants list, it shows panelists, and then if you click attendees, it shows attendees. So attendees means these are the people who are in the audience seats. When you see panelists, that means those are the people who are all up on stage with you. And again, when your camera is off, the people who are in the attendee seats, the people who are watching on Facebook Live or in the recording, they won't see you. When your camera is on, then you will be visible to them and they will be able to see you. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, and then I'm also going to make all of you co-hosts, so then that way, you know, you have the functionality to share your screen. You have the functionality to, if a participant needed to be removed or anything like that, you'd also be able to do that as well. Now, what I want you to do is, you see where the Q&A section is? Sinclair typed in, can you see the participants? So someone could actually type an answer. So if you click type an answer, you have the ability to type an answer. Or if you click answer live, then that means you're going to answer whatever question it is live. And so no one's going to type an answer right there. So what questions do you have for us? Any questions as it relates to webinar? Was this clear? Were you able to understand it?
Jen, what link do you use as a host to enable the three of us to be panelists?
So if you open your participants list, on your participants list, there is an attendee list. For the attendee list, if I click more on an attendee's name, I can click promote to panelist, and then they'll be able to come up as a panelist, or I can give them the ability to speak, and then they'll only be able to speak. Does that make sense to everybody?
So it's the word more that enables the participants to be a co-host or a panelist.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's exactly what it would be, is being able to click that more section and then be able to bring them up. The other thing too is we've done that during webinars before, where we had some panelists who used a different link or they used a different email. And so we're like, man, where are they at? Like, we're getting ready to start. And then they say, hey, like, I'm waiting for the webinar. And then we're like, well, no, we're on in the practice session. And so when you start out, if you are in the practice mode or practice session, if one of your panelists didn't click on their panelist link to come in, they're going to continue waiting in the audience, right? Where you can't see them, they can't see or hear you because you haven't started the webinar. So for that particular instance, we had to start the webinar and then pull her up as a panelist because for some reason, she was not clicking on the correct link. And so we made her a panelist once we started started the webinar, and she was good to go, right? And so just be mindful of things like that. Other questions, comments? All right. Does this make sense? Does the webinar, everything that was shared, make sense?
At the end of the webinar, does your policy with Zoom and your license with Zoom as a webinar, do they print out for you the no-shows that did not attend?
Oh yeah, so you can go in and to reports. Remember we talked about reports and how you get your reports. So there's a webinar section where you have the ability to go in and for your reports, let's go to account management. Let's go to reports. So if you look at my screen, you see there's a separate section for webinar. So it shows you have the ability to get your registration, your attendees, your performance report, Q&As, your polls, surveys, and stuff that you've done. So if you click on webinar, then what you're going to do is tell webinar or tell Zoom what report or information you want. So you have the ability to go in and do an attendance report. With the attendance report, this is going to be who attended, who didn't attend, how many minutes they were on for, and so forth. So it'll break it down by like yeses and nos. And then it'll also have like their email address on there, and then how long they attended. So for example, for Connected to Lead, our Phenomenal Women Lead Summit last year, we had, I think there were, that's a good question. How many people? Maybe like 161 people registered, but we probably had like 105 people show up or something. And so what we did was, for the people who didn't show up, we were able to see it with the attendee report. And so for all the ones that had a no next to them, meaning they did not attend, we just copied their email address, we pasted it in an email, blind copied, so then that way it wasn't this list of emails. And then we said, hey, sorry we missed you. Here's a link to the recording from the Phenomenal Women Lead Summit. Hopefully you can join us again next year. And it was a simple email and something we were able to do. But you can definitely get your the different reports. You can definitely get the different reports that you have by just going to your report section and then making sure you put in whatever date it was and then downloading it. Great question. Other questions that folks have? You can also download the chat to recordings. You can download audio, so it can be just the audio from the webinar, no video. So you have that ability.
I have one more report question.
Yeah.
Let's say someone did not attend and they say, something unforeseen interrupted their day and they couldn't attend. Can you send a reminder 1 month later that the same webinar will be shown and encouraging them to sign up again?
Oh, absolutely. Because when someone registers, because it's virtual, Zoom has to collect their email address, right? So they can get the link. So when someone registers, I would definitely send it out. I would also say, even for the people who attended, you can say, hey, we're doing this again. If you want to, if there's anything you think you missed, you can join us again, or you can tell them, the people who previously attended, hey, share this with someone you know. We hope that this webinar was beneficial for you. Share this with someone you know, and we'd love for them to join us next month, right? So I'd say, for folks who didn't come, for folks who did come, there's a way to be able to send it to them. So then that way you can make sure they get the information. Because you'll have their name, you'll have their email address, and then any other identifiers that you put in the registration. Yeah. Other questions? All right, Sinclair.
So how many people can you invite to be panelists?
That is a really good question. We have not tried that. Let me see if I can get a response. 1 second. Okay, so it looks like depending on your meeting capacity, you can add that many panelists. So we have 500 in our webinar capacity, so we could have 500 panelists. So if you had 1,000, then you could have that. So it says you can add up to 1,000 panelists depending on your meeting, your maximum meeting capacity.
They would just be smaller faces or smaller pictures.
Right. And also I think it would depend on, is everybody's faces showing at that time or not? Because remember, you have folks who are in your audience and they're watching whatever it is. And so, I'd say as your panelist cameras are on, you want to be mindful of that. Like, do their cameras need to be on? Do people need to see them the whole time? If that's the case, absolutely, right? But if they don't need to be on the entire time and it's only when they're coming in to speak about a certain thing, I would say do it that way because it provides a cleaner feel. It also helps people focus on whomever's talking versus all of these different people. Hopefully that makes sense. Other questions? These have been really great questions.
I hope you just keep us informed as to, what you're working on, maybe every 6 weeks or 8 weeks, just tell us what you're working on.
Yeah, Erica, tell them what you're working on.
Professionally, because
Yeah.
you're doing, higher tech, and I would be doing either teaching or counseling. And they are both communication fields, and yours is just technology communication instead of face-to-face or whatever, giving a class.
No, thank you for that. You definitely bring up a good point. We always have stuff going on. Erica always has stuff going on. For those of you who may not have heard the announcement, Erica is the prevention coordinator for South Bay Prevention. And so she'll be the point of contact for the programming pieces and things like that. I will be continue to support because South Bay is my first BHS love. And so we hope to, Erica and I have been in conversation, we hope to continue to provide really great workshops, really great programming that's going to support you all. I definitely say if you have some suggestions for some types of workshops or information you would like to learn, you can send an email and we can check the calendar. Also see either if we know something, if there's someone we know that can come in and do that, then we'd be more than willing to, sometimes it's just really the time. Like last month there were so many workshops and presentations and events and stuff that Erica led and I supported. And so sometimes it's just a little wild, but other times we can make it happen. So definitely reach out and let us know. Other things before we jump off? Because Zoom webinar, this is our final piece. We like to do this at the end because everybody may not need it. Some people may want to use it, or maybe you've been a part of a webinar that's been on Zoom and you were trying to figure out like, what, or how did they, or what's going on with that, and may not have known. And so this is really what it is, right? So you all, we can see each other, but you all can't see Selena or Noel, right? You can't see them because they're not up here essentially on stage. And so, that's definitely something to be mindful of. And then the last thing I'll say before we jump off is you still have the ability to do immersive view. So if you recall, we did the immersive view. When did we do session 2, 3? I'm not sure when it was, but we have the ability to do immersive view as well. And so you see we have our immersive view. And so you could even do your webinar with an immersive view. You can change that to be something that best fits whatever it is that you're doing. And so, we have cute at doing that. I love it. We have, just the change. We have the changes here as it relates to the immersive view, but you could utilize something like this for your webinar if you want to make it look a little different. So that's it. That's all we have for everyone. Look, I need to be taller in my seat. So we definitely appreciate all of you for the love. This has been an awesome journey. I'm glad we've been able to talk about some of the new features. Feel free to reach out and connect because we definitely want to stay connected. And we're looking at planning some stuff for the summer. So I know vacations and things happen, but hopefully we can do some stuff and get everybody there. Erica's put up our final screen, which is our thank you screen that has our email addresses. And so we had an amazing video from Melissa talking about some horrifying stories. So we also want to thank Tatiana, who is an intern with MAD, who has joined us for the past 3 sessions and also done a great job. And then wonderful, amazing Jeannie, who we love, who is the prevention director with ADAP. She's always doing a lot of great work and always supports the work that we're doing. Love the partnership. And with that, we are done. Any final words or comments, Erica?
No, I would personally like to thank you for your leadership and just always being so great and
Aww.
to everyone. So thank you. And I hope that you all learned something and will utilize some of the tools that we shared throughout this whole navigating Zoom like a boss, and that you all are ready to navigate Zoom like a boss, and, you know, just keep practicing. I'm still learning. It's always something new out there they're adding. So just keep looking into it and advancing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, with that, oh, the one thing I will say, you know how sometimes I do think this is important to add. You know how sometimes when you're in a meeting, you have your Zoom meeting going and you have so sometimes we'll have people who linger on because sometimes they stepped away from their computer or sometimes they got a call or whatever it was, right? So they're still in the main space and we want to debrief. Now in meeting, you could turn your waiting room back on, or maybe you didn't have one, but you can turn it on, and then you can move those people into the waiting room. And then they're no longer in the main space and you can debrief and have a conversation and so forth. However, on webinar version, it is not the same way. So once you disable practice mode, that's it. So if you need to debrief or something like that, we suggest having, like another link or something that your panelists go on. So then that way you can debrief, or in the webinar and have all of them join the same webinar link. So then that way it'll go back into practice mode, just leave it, do your debrief, and then everybody can hop off. So just know that until you press end on your webinar, then people could still pop in, not in the panelist space, right? But they could still pop in as an attendee. They'd be able to hear whatever it is you're discussing, that kind of stuff. Yeah, Edwina.
So you'll be in the person who left or whatever, they'll be in the main room, and then everybody else will be in the waiting room, so to speak. I forgot what it was that you called it.
Yeah, for the waiting room.
Not the waiting room, you know what I mean?
Enable the practice session?
The practice session. So everybody else will be in the practice session, and then that other person that lingered on will be in the main space by themselves.
No. So if you end the webinar, no one will be on. If you were to start the webinar again, then all of you would just go back into the practice space, and then the attendees, they would just see a screen that says something like whatever you all saw, waiting for a host to start webinar or something like that. They would just see that.
So you're saying that you just go ahead and end it because that person's still there, end it, and then everybody else will come back in, and then everybody else will be in.
Right, because they will, those people will have had a panelist link, so they won't go back into the main space, so you'll be good. And then after you finish debriefing, you can just press end. If you don't need a debrief, just end the webinar, because you don't need to stay on, right? So I think that just depends, because we learned a lot after our first webinar in May of 2020, because we for sure were like debriefing, and then we're like, man, why won't these people leave? So then we started removing people, which you can remove them, but if you remove them, if you set a recurring webinar, they won't be able to come back to the other webinars unless your setting is changed where they can rejoin even if they're removed. So please be mindful of that, because we've seen that come up too.
Jen, can an attendee cause Zoom bombing in a webinar?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
We attended, so certain things, so let me be clear, certain things, everything Erica shared, they may not be able to do all of that, right? They can't share their screen. However, one of the ones Erica talked about was for the county, and they were doing for Prevention Week, I think it was May of 2020, they were doing some prevention week weekly activities, and they had a webinar version, and we were on as participants. We didn't have any control over the event, so I do want to say that. And there was someone who got on, and they were putting the N-word back to back to back to back to back to back. The whole chat just filled up. N-word, 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 N-word. And we're like, oh my gosh. So we're like texting one another, like, oh my gosh, like, do you see this? Yes, we see this. Oh my gosh, like, who's leading it? How can we tell them like what to do? Like, mind you, we had never even done navigating Zoom like a boss. We had just done so many workshops, right? We done so many workshops, so we learned some things, but it was ridiculous. And then we started seeing some of the names that the people were using. The names that they used were like those, we like bend over or whatever, right? It was like those types of names. And so then right there, it's like, well, you already know, like, this person doesn't belong or whatever, but it was already too late because the chat box had already had all that stuff. However, what I don't think they realized was that the capabilities then too, you could have it so participants couldn't chat, right? And so I think the thing is, sometimes things are going to happen. It's about how you all respond to it, right? Because you could be like, oh my gosh, who's putting, like, mind you, remember, you all could see us, but we couldn't see you. So think about it. If you're a panelist up here, or you're the host of the account or whatever, and you were to say, your camera's on, you got Facebook Live going, oh my gosh, like, who's putting the N-word in the chat? Then it draws more attention to it, right? The people on Facebook Live can't see the chat, so they don't know. The people in the recording don't have access to the chat. Your participants have access, but one of the things that you can do, if you have a co-host or you have someone supporting you, have them be the person, or you're the person or whatever, to be able to just make a quick change real quick. So participants don't have the ability to use the chat or whatever the case may be, and then continue with the program. You can even type a little message in the chat and say, we're not sure who that person was, but we have removed them from Zoom. We apologize, but let's continue to have a great time, or whatever, right? But the point is, I'm not going to put so much energy and attention to that, because we want to make sure we have the ability to continue going. The other thing too, where I could see Zoom bombing come up before we get off, is that someone may raise their virtual hand to speak, and maybe their name is regular, or not regular, but it's not inappropriate, right? And then you allow them to speak. Maybe you don't make them a panelist, but you allow them to speak, and then they start wilding out, just saying stuff that's off the wall. You have the ability to disallow them from speaking. So just immediately go to the participant list, and you're going to disallow them from speaking, and then you're good to go. If you're like, well, the chat is open, remove the person too. Like, you can do that as well. So there are options. My biggest thing is, it's all about how we pivot everything. It doesn't matter what it is. If you find out that the workshop can't happen that day, or the students who are supposed to present can't present, how do you pivot? So that's it. No lecture, hopefully. Okay, with
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. Have a good summer.
Thanks, you too.
Hope to see you again.
Same
Thank you.
here.
Thank
I know
you.
we'll have some workshops coming up, not to make it sound like it's going to be off in the distance, but thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your week.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.